There's something about storms that makes everything feel different. Like the moment the sky darkens and the wind starts to rise, the world slowly shifts into something unfamiliar, something heavier, as if the normal rules don't fully apply anymore. And most people think the fear comes from the thunder, the lightning, the sound of rain hitting the windows. But sometimes it's not the storm itself that's disturbing, it's what happens during it. Because storms have a way of covering things, masking sounds, hiding movement, turning the outside world into something chaotic and unpredictable. And in that chaos, it becomes much harder to notice when something isn't right. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 horror stories that happened during storms. Moments where people experienced things that didn't make sense. Things that felt connected to the storm itself in ways they still can't explain. And these aren't just moments of fear caused by loud thunder or power outages. These are the kind of experiences that stay with you long after the sky clears. The first story comes from a man who lived alone in a small house on the edge of a rural area. The kind of place where storms hit harder than usual, with strong winds, heavy rain, and long stretches of darkness when the power would go out completely. One night, a storm rolled in unexpectedly, the kind that builds quickly, the sky turning dark within minutes, the wind picking up in sudden bursts. And by the time he realized how bad it was getting, the rain was already hitting the windows hard enough to make it difficult to see outside. He wasn't too worried at first. Storms like this weren't unusual in that area, and he had dealt with them before without any problems. He turned on a few lights, made sure everything was closed properly, and settled into the living room, planning to wait it out. But as the storm grew stronger, something started to feel off. It wasn't obvious at first, just a small detail. The sound of knocking. At first, he assumed it was something loose outside. Maybe a branch hitting the side of the house. Something normal during strong winds. But the more he listened, the less it made sense. The sound wasn't random. It wasn't irregular. It was controlled. Even coming from the front door. His attention shifted toward it as he sat there, listening carefully, his expression tightening slightly as the knocking continued. 3 slow taps, followed by a pause, then 3 more. The exact same pattern repeating again and again. A strange feeling settled in his chest as he stared at the door, because no one would be outside in a storm like that. Not at that hour, not in that area. And even if someone was, they wouldn't be knocking that calmly, that deliberately. He stood up slowly, his movements cautious, his eyes still fixed on the door as he moved closer, the sound growing clearer with each step, the knocks echoing through the quiet house between the crashes of thunder. When he reached the door, he hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering near the handle, listening one more time, and the knocking stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt wrong, too sudden, too complete. He waited a few seconds, expecting it to start again, but it didn't. Just the sound of the storm outside, the rain, the wind, nothing else. Slowly, he opened the door. The outside was exactly what he expected. Heavy rain, strong wind, darkness stretching out beyond the porch. No one there, no movement, no sign that anyone had been knocking just moments ago. He stood there for a few seconds, scanning the area, his eyes just into the darkness, but there was nothing. Eventually, he closed the door, shaking his head slightly. telling himself it had to be something else, something the storm had caused, even if it didn't make complete sense. But the moment he turned around, the knocking started again, this time from behind him. His entire body tensed as he slowly looked towards the back of the house, his heart starting to beat faster as the same pattern repeated. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 3 more, coming from the back door now. The realization hit him instantly. Whatever had been at the front door hadn't moved around the house. It had never been outside to begin with. The second story comes from a college student who had stayed back on campus during a severe storm warning. The kind of storm that most people prepared for in advance, with alerts sent out, classes cancelled, and students advised to either go home or stay indoors. But for him, leaving wasn't an option, so he decided to stay in his dorm room, expecting nothing more than a loud night of rain and thunder. At first, everything felt normal. The wind picked up slowly, the sky darkened earlier than usual, and by the time night fully settled in, the storm had already reached its peak, rain hitting the windows in heavy waves. The sound constant and overwhelming, mixed with distant thunder that shook the building slightly every time it struck. He had his lights on, headphones nearby, trying to ignore the intensity of it. But after a while, the power went out completely, plunging the entire dorm into darkness. At that point, the atmosphere changed instantly. The noise of the storm didn't go away. But without the lights, without the usual background sounds of electricity and people moving around, everything felt more isolated, more exposed. He turned on his phone flashlight, placing it on the desk to keep the room dimly lit, telling himself it was just a temporary outage. Nothing unusual during a storm like this. Minutes passed, maybe longer. It was hard to tell with no clock visible. And that's when he noticed something that didn't match the rest of the noise. A sound, faint at first, almost hidden under the rain. Scraping, slow, uneven, coming from outside the window. He frowned slightly, turning his head toward it, trying to focus, telling himself it was probably just debris, maybe a branch being dragged by the wind. Something normal, something explainable. But the longer he listened, the more wrong it felt. The sound wasn't random. It had a pattern, a rhythm, like something was dragging itself across the wall. His chest tightened slightly as he stood up, moving closer to the window, the flashlight in his hand shaking just a little as he raised it, the beam cutting through the darkness toward the glass. At first, he couldn't see anything clearly, just the reflection of the room and the streaks of rain sliding down the surface. But then, the scraping stopped instantly. The silence felt sharp compared to the constant noise of the storm, and for a moment, nothing moved. He stayed there, staring, his breath slower now, waiting for the sound to return, but it didn't. Just rain, just wind, nothing else. He let out a small breath, stepping back slightly, telling himself it was overthinking. Just his mind reacting to the storm and the darkness. But before he could fully relax, something appeared on the glass. A shape, pressed lightly against it from the outside. His body went still as his eyes locked onto it, the faint outline becoming clearer as lightning flashed in the distance for a split second, illuminating the entire window. And in that moment, he saw it clearly. A hand, flattened against the glass, fingers spread unnaturally wide, positioned at a height that didn't make sense, because his room wasn't on the ground floor. It was 3 stories up. The light disappeared instantly, plunging everything back into darkness. But the image stayed in his mind, clear and undeniable. His heart started pounding as he stepped back slowly, his grip tightening on the flashlight, his mind racing through explanations, none of which made sense. The hand didn't move. It didn't slide. It didn't disappear. It stayed there, perfectly still. And then, the fingers moved, just slightly, curling inward, as if gripping the glass from the outside. A wave of fear hit him instantly as he stumbled back another step, his breathing becoming uneven as he stared at the window, unable to look away. And then something even worse happened. The hand started to drag downward, slowly, leaving behind faint streaks on the glass as it moved, as if whatever was attached to it was shifting its weight, adjusting its position, trying to hold on. The scraping sound returned, louder now, clearer, not from the wind, not from debris, but from something that was physically there, outside, at a height it shouldn't have been able to reach. He didn't move closer again. He couldn't. Every instinct in his body told him to stay back, to keep distance, to not get near the window again. And for a few seconds, he just stood there, frozen, watching as the hand slowly slid out of view, disappearing below the edge of the window. The sound stopped immediately after that. Complete silence, except for the storm. He waited, seconds, then longer. Nothing came back. No movement, no sound. Just darkness. He stayed like that for a long time before finally forcing himself to step forward again. His movements slow and hesitant. His eyes fixed on the glass as he raised the flashlight once more. The window was empty. Nothing there. No hand, no shape, just rain. But something remained. Marks. Long faint streaks running down the surface, exactly where the hand had been. His chest tightened as he stared at them, his mind trying to process what he had just seen. When suddenly, his phone vibrated on the desk behind him. The sound made him flinch as he turned quickly, walking back and picking it up, expecting a message, maybe a notification about the storm. But what he saw made his entire body go cold. It wasn't a text. It wasn't an alert. It was a photo, taken from his own phone, seconds ago. The image loaded slowly, the brightness adjusting, and when it fully appeared, he felt his grip tighten instantly. It was a picture of him, standing in front of the window, taken from outside. The third story comes from a woman who was driving alone late at night during a severe storm, the kind where visibility drops almost to zero, the rain coming down so heavily that the road ahead becomes nothing more than blurred lights and shadows, and the sound of the storm fills the entire space around you, making it hard to focus on anything else. She hadn't planned to be out that late, but delays had forced her to drive through the worst part of it. And by the time she realized how intense the storm had become, stopping wasn't really an option. The road was empty, the nearest town still miles away, and pulling over in that kind of weather felt just as risky as continuing forward. The windshield wipers moved back and forth at their fastest speed, barely keeping up with the rain, the headlights reflecting off the wet road in a way that made everything look distorted, unreal. And for a while, she focused only on driving, trying to ignore the uneasiness that came with the isolation. But then something small caught her attention. A sound, faint, almost lost under the noise of the storm. At first, she thought it was something in the car. Maybe something loose, shifting with the movement. But the more she listened, the clearer it became. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a soft tapping, coming from behind her. Her grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel as her eyes flicked briefly toward the rearview mirror, but she couldn't see anything clearly. Just darkness filling the back seat, the storm making it impossible to make out details. She told herself it was nothing, just the car, just the storm. But the tapping didn't stop. It continued, slow, even, like something lightly hitting the back of the seat. Her breathing became slightly uneven as she tried to focus on the road again, her mind running through possibilities, none of them comforting. And then, the tapping stopped. The silence that followed felt immediate, too sudden, too complete. For a few seconds, nothing happened. And then, she heard it again, closer this time, not from the back seat, but right behind her head. A soft, almost inaudible sound, like fingers brushing lightly against the fabric of the seat. Her entire body went tense as her hands tightened on the wheel. Her heart started to pound as a cold realization began to form. She hadn't opened the car since the storm started. She hadn't stopped. There was no way anyone could have gotten inside. And yet, the sound was there, right behind her. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road, her breathing shallow, her entire focus locked forward as she tried to convince herself it wasn't real, that it was just her imagination reacting to stress and darkness. But then, the rearview mirror shifted slightly, not physically, not moving out of place, but the reflection changed. At first, she didn't notice it clearly. Just something off about the angle, something that didn't match what she expected to see. And then slowly, the shape in the back seat became more defined. A figure, sitting there, perfectly still. Her breath caught as her eyes locked onto the mirror, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing, because she knew for a fact no one had been in the car when she started driving. The figure didn't move, didn't react, just sat there, its face hidden in shadow, its presence quiet but unmistakable. Her heart started racing as fear took over, her thoughts becoming scattered, her grip tightening on the wheel as she tried to decide what to do, whether to stop, whether to keep driving, whether to turn around and face it, but her body refused to move. And then, the figure leaned forward, slowly, deliberately, its face moving closer to the space between the seats, closer to her. Still just a shadow, still impossible to see clearly, but close enough that she could feel it now. Not physically touching her, but there, right behind her. And then, it spoke, softly, almost blending into the sound of the rain. "You should have stayed inside." Her entire body went cold as those words reached her, her breath catching as panic started to take over. Her mind racing as she pressed harder on the accelerator without thinking, desperate to reach somewhere, anywhere that felt safe. But the road ahead only stretched further into darkness, the storm showing no sign of stopping. She didn't look back again. She didn't check the mirror. She just drove, her entire focus locked forward, her heart pounding as the seconds stretched into something that felt much longer, until finally, the storm began to ease. Slowly, gradually, the rain becoming lighter, the visibility improving just enough for her to see the road more clearly. And with that, the tension in her body began to loosen slightly. The sounds inside the car returned to normal. No tapping, no movement, just silence. After a few minutes, she carefully glanced at the rearview mirror again. The back seat was empty. Completely. No figure. No shadow. Nothing. A small sense of relief washed over her as she let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her grip on the wheel relaxing slightly as she continued driving, convincing herself it had been stress, fear, something her mind had created in the middle of the storm. But then, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the fogged-up glass of the passenger window beside her, there were words, written from the inside, slowly fading as the condensation cleared. You didn't listen. And the most disturbing thing about storms isn't just the noise, the darkness, or the way they isolate you from everything around you. It's the way they blur the line between what's real and what isn't. Because when the wind is loud enough and the rain is heavy enough, it becomes almost impossible to trust what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and even what you're feeling. In all of these stories, the fear didn't come from the storm itself. It came from what the storm allowed to happen. The way it covered sounds that shouldn't be there. The way it hid movement that should have been obvious. The way it created moments where something could be close to you and you wouldn't realize it until it was already too late. A knock that moves from one side of the house to the other without anything outside. A hand appearing when no one could possibly reach. A presence inside a car that was never opened. 3 different situations, but all connected by the same unsettling idea that during a storm, the world doesn't just become louder. It becomes easier for something to exist unnoticed. Because think about it. When everything around you is chaotic, when your senses are already overwhelmed, when your focus is divided between the noise, the darkness, and the environment, it becomes much harder to detect something that doesn't belong, something that doesn't follow the normal rules. And maybe that's why these moments feel so difficult to explain. Because they don't stand out clearly. They blend in just enough to be dismissed, just enough to be ignored, until they don't. The scariest part isn't just that these people experienced something during a storm. It's that in every case, whatever was there didn't need to rush, didn't need to force anything. It just waited quietly, using the storm itself as cover, as if it understood that no one would notice it clearly until it chose to be noticed. So, the next time you find yourself alone during a storm, listening to the rain, watching the shadows shift with every flash of lightning, hearing sounds that don't quite match the rest of the noise, don't ignore that feeling too quickly. Don't dismiss it as just part of the storm, because sometimes the storm isn't the only thing outside. And once it passes, once everything becomes quiet again, you might realize that the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels like something is still there, just waiting for the next time the noise comes back so it can move without being seen.